he's now making. It feels like I'm really doing something wrong, definitely.
On the 3rd of August 2026, UAE Team Emirates XRG confirmed that Tadej Pogačar would race the Vuelta a España, 7 years after his debut there in professional cycling's most demanding 3-week format. In 2019, he had finished 3rd overall, with 3 stage wins and the Young Riders jersey. He returns now having just won his 5th Tour de France, a record-equaling total, and having already taken the Giro d'Italia in 2024. Only one Grand Tour has never carried his name to the top of the general classification. It is the one that starts in Monaco on the 22nd of August, the UCI World Tour's 3rd and final Grand Tour of the season. If you like getting inside a rivalry before the racing actually starts, hitting subscribe helps put stories like this one in front of more people who follow the sport as closely as you do. The announcement itself came attached to a clip on the Vuelta's own account, Pogačar 20 years old and baby-faced, climbing into Andorra during that first Grand Tour, captioned with 4 words, "Summer is getting interesting." To understand what he is arriving with 7 years later, it helps to look at what he just finished. Pogačar rode into Paris 3 weeks ago with a final margin over Remco Evenepoel of 6 minutes and 26 seconds, the largest winning gap of any of his 5 tours. He took the yellow jersey on stage 6 in the Pyrenees and never gave it back, holding a lead that grew from 2 minutes and 42 seconds to more than 7 minutes before he eased off in the final week. He won 5 stages, including stage 19 up Alpe d'Huez, a ride some in the press box were already calling one of the great climbing performances in the sport's history. That win brought his career total to 26 Tour stage victories, 4th on the all-time list, and only 2 behind Bernard Hinault's 28. He also extended his own record to 7 consecutive Tour podiums, and at 27 years, 10 months, and 5 days old, became the youngest rider ever to win 5 titles, taking that particular record from Eddy Merckx, who was 29 when he got there. 5 Tour wins puts him level with Jacques Anquetil, Merckx, Hinault, and Miguel Indurain, the only other men to reach that number. It did not come as one uninterrupted streak. Jonas Vingegaard beat him in 2022 and 2023, before Pogačar answered with 3 straight titles from 2024 onward, which is worth remembering mainly because it means this version of him was built by losing twice, not by never losing at all. Vingegaard was sitting 2nd overall again this year before he crashed out on stage 15, one of several rivals whose tour ended early rather than on the road behind Pogačar. Winning the Giro, the Tour, and the Vuelta across a career is rare enough that only 8 men have done it since the Vuelta began in 1935. Doing the Tour and the Vuelta in the same season is rarer, managed exactly 3 times by Anquetil, Hinault, and Chris Froome. Vingegaard joined the full set himself the previous spring, adding the Giro to a resume that already had the other 2. If Pogačar wins in Spain this September, he becomes the 9th man to complete the collection and the 4th to do the Tour and Vuelta double in 1 year, arriving at that chance as the reigning champion of the race he is leaving for 3 weeks to go and win a different one. Vuelta director Javier Guillen had been chasing this exact start list for months, reportedly discussing the race directly with Prince Albert of Monaco as the host city prepared for the Grand Depart, and had said publicly that he was hoping for what French media translated as a starry lineup. He got more than he could have planned for. Not just cycling's most dominant rider chasing the one Grand Tour missing from his name, but that rider's closest domestic rival walking in with a car accident behind him and a 5-time record in front of him. His route to Granada, where the race finishes on the 13th of September, is not gentle. The 2026 Vuelta covers roughly 3,300 kilometers and close to 58,000 meters of climbing across 21 stages, with 7 summit finishes and 2 individual time trials, packed into 3 weeks that several riders have already called the hardest route the race has produced in years. There is a stage into Andorra in the first week, the same country where Pogačar won his first ever Grand Tour stage back in 2019. Whether that was deliberate scheduling or coincidence, it puts him back on the exact roads where this whole story started, 7 years and 5 Tour titles later. Whoever crosses those summit finishes first will spend the night in La Roja, the red jersey that marks the general classification leader at the Vuelta a España.
Specifically, the World Championships and the possibility of adding a second road world title.
Standing between him and the one trophy he is missing is a rider who has already won this specific race 4 times and who happens to share a homeland with him. Primoz Roglic took the Vuelta in 2019, 2020, 2021, and again in 2024, a run matched only by the Spaniard Roberto Heras, who won it the same number of times between 2000 and 2005. Nobody has ever won the Vuelta 5 times. Roglic, at 36, built his entire season around the chance to be the first. His 4 wins did not come the same way twice. The first, in 2019, was the race Pogačar himself debuted in, finishing 3rd while Roglic took the overall for Jumbo-Visma. The second and third followed back-to-back in 2020 and 2021, part of a stretch where he was arguably the best 3-week rider on the planet. The fourth arrived 3 years later, in 2024, after 2 seasons in which injuries and Vingegaard's rise had made people start writing him off as a fading force rather than a repeat champion. He answered that by winning anyway, on a body that had already survived more crashes than most careers see in total. 2 riders from a country of roughly 2 million people now hold a combined 9 Tour de France titles and a share of the all-time Vuelta record between them, which is the kind of statistic that stops sounding like a coincidence and starts sounding like something in the water, or the mountains, or the way Slovenian cycling develops its climbers. The 2 Slovenians have already decided 1 Tour de France between them, and it remains the clearest picture of what Pogačar is capable of on his worst day against Roglic at his best. In 2020, Roglic carried a 57-second lead into the final competitive stage, a mountain time trial up La Planche de Belleville. Pogačar, 21 years old and riding his first tour, started the climb already 13 seconds down at the first checkpoint and kept losing time on the flat approach. Then, the road tilted upward. He caught Roglic's virtual time inside 4 kilometers of the summit and kept pulling away, eventually beating him on the stage by 1 minute and 56 seconds, enough to flip a 57-second deficit into a 59-second overall lead with 1 stage left to Paris. Roglic never got the jersey back. It was, at the time, one of the biggest single-day reversals the Tour had seen in decades, and it happened to the country's biggest star at the hands of his own compatriot. That decision alone tells you something about how he sees this year. He skipped the Tour de France entirely, skipped the Giro too, and pointed everything at 3 weeks in Spain that begin on the 22nd of August. It has not been an easy season to watch unfold. He was 5th at Tirreno Adriatico in the spring, 3rd at Milano-Torino, then cracked on the final day at Etzulia Basque Country and finished 16th, before an 18th place at the Tour de Romandie. In June, at the Tour de Suisse, the one race where he and Pogačar actually shared a start list this year, he finished 8th, more than 9 minutes behind the winner. That winner was Pogačar. Then, in the final week of July, Roglic won the Slovenian National Time Trial Championship and placed 4th in the road race, which was, by the standards of his year, a genuinely good week. He had 1 race block left before the Vuelta, the Clásica San Sebastian, followed by the Vuelta a Burgos, 4 days apart, both designed to sharpen his form before the race that actually mattered. Neither happened. In the last days of July, while training at altitude, Roglic was hit by a car. He posted about it himself on Instagram, a photograph of heavy bruising across the back of his legs and hip. Got hit by a car a few days ago, he wrote. Won't be participating in San Sebastian and in Burgos, unfortunately. Not the best scenario, but it's life. No further details came from him or from his team, Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe, about how it happened or how serious it actually was.
Carapaz to have to close the gap. Mass is on the wheel, and right now, this is a 3-up time trial for Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe.
What is known is that both remaining tune-up races are gone, and that a rider chasing a record 5th Vuelta title, in what is already his final season with this particular team after 3 years together, now has to rebuild his form with less racing and less time than he planned. There is also the matter of what this Vuelta means for the team around him. Roglic is leaving Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe once the season ends, closing out 3 years with the squad without having announced where he goes next. A record 5th Vuelta title would be the kind of exit that gets remembered, regardless of what jersey he wears in 2027. A quiet one, undone by a car he never saw coming, would not be. Neither outcome changes the contract, but it changes what people say about these 3 years when they talk about them afterward. It would not be the first time Roglic has arrived at a Grand Tour carrying visible damage and still found a way to be dangerous.
That's all. I really don't know what to say. Unbelievable.
It's not a dream. You've won it.
In 2021, a crash on stage 3 of the Tour de France left him so heavily bandaged across his hip, elbow, shoulder, and legs that he joked he looked like a mummy. He rode on for 6 more days before eventually withdrawing once the race hit the Alps. That was a low point in a season that ended a few months later with an Olympic gold medal in the individual time trial, in the second of what would become 4 Vuelta titles. So the car and the bruising in the 2 missed races do not necessarily mean much on their own. Roglic has built a career on arriving somewhere in worse shape than the story suggests he should be, and leaving in better shape than anyone expected. What is different this time is who else is on the start line. Vingegaard has not confirmed Vuelta plans for this year at all, still recovering from the crash that ended his tour. Evenepoel is skipping it too. That thins the field of riders who have actually beaten Pogačar in a 3-week race, down to essentially one name, and it is a name currently working off a training crash instead of a proper build-up. The closest thing Pogačar has to a rival with recent form against him might end up being his own teammate. João Almeida was confirmed for the Vuelta on the same day Pogačar was, and Almeida's record is a strange mix of proof and unfinished business. He was the first Portuguese rider to reach a Grand Tour podium since 1979, taking 3rd at the 2023 Giro, and he has since added a runner-up finish at the Vuelta itself. But across 10 Grand Tour starts, he has only made the podium twice, and 3 times he has not finished at all. He is 27 now, born in Caldas da Rainha on the Portuguese coast, and still considered by many inside his own team as the closest thing to a natural heir once Pogačar eventually slows down. This Vuelta was supposed to be one of the races where he finally got to find out for himself whether he can win one outright rather than finish near the top of one. Instead, he will be doing it from the same start ramp as the most dominant rider of his generation, who also happens to be the man whose form dictates team strategy in the mountains. Pogačar and Roglic have never really raced the same way. Roglic came to cycling late, after a career as a ski jumper, and it shows in how deliberately he rides, pacing efforts to the watt, and rarely attacking before the moment calls for it, a style built on control rather than improvisation. Pogačar attacks whenever the terrain looks interesting to him, sometimes with 60 kilometers still to race, on the theory that panic in a rival's legs is worth more than a saved match. It is the same theory that turned a flat Tyrrhenian stage into a 2-minute gap on this year's tour, and the same one that, back in 2020, made a mountain time trial feel less like an individual effort and more like a public unraveling for the man in yellow. That unpredictability is a genuine threat to a fully fit Roglic, and something closer to a formality against one still finding his legs after a car accident. None of that changes what the route itself seems built for. 7 summit finishes and gradients over 10% on repeat across 3 weeks is not a course for anyone who wins on raw power alone. It rewards riders who can suffer for 3 weeks in a row and still climb well on the last one, which happens to be exactly the profile that won Roglic all 4 of his previous titles, and exactly the profile that undid him in that one time trial back in 2020, on a day when climbing legs alone were not enough. If his legs come back in time, the terrain that awaits him in Spain is closer to his strength than a flat clock ever was. If they don't, Pogačar arrives at the only Grand Tour missing from his record with the deepest form of his career, a thinner field of proven rivals than he faced at his own Tour de France this year, and just over 2 weeks between the day this was written and the day the race actually starts in Monaco. Behind those 2 names sits a second tier that will matter if either man falters. Felix Gall, Matthias Skalmosa, and Kian Utebrooks are among the other general classification riders expected on the start list, along with Sepp Kuss, who has finished on Vuelta podiums of his own and knows the demands of the race better than most. Enric Mas, the Spanish climber who has spent years grinding out top 10 Vuelta finishes on home roads, and Richard Carapaz, The Ecuadorian, who already has an Olympic gold medal and a Giro title on his palmares, are also expected to contest the general classification, adding genuine depth to a field that, on paper, looks like it has 2 names at the top and a long drop to the rest. None of them have shown the form this year to beat a healthy Pogačar over 3 weeks, and none of them have Roglic's specific history with these roads. They exist mostly as the answer to the question of who takes the podium spots that Pogačar and Roglič do not. That leaves Roglič until the 22nd of August to turn training bruises back into race form, on a course built for exactly his kind of rider, against the one compatriot who has already shown he can take a lead like that away from him with nothing left but a bicycle and a clock.